a problem. I have 45 pounds worth of TTRPG books, and I still don't have enough. Clearly. So we're gonna go ahead and go through them all. So, I don't even know where to go first. I have so many. I guess we should go with I can go with the ones that I have gotten recently, which is going to be Star Trek Adventures and Magnus Archives. Let's go with Star Trek first, because I am extremely special interest in Star Trek, on top of tabletop games. I'm still reading through this one because I literally bought this about a week ago. It's been out of print for over a year, and I thought that with it being out of print for a year, I didn't even know it was out of print. I just found this one in a game shop, and I was like, oh my god. A second edition, and they told me, oh yeah, it's been out for a year, and then they just suddenly pumped out second edition. I was like, oh, okay. So I immediately bought it, didn't impulse purchase, didn't even think once about it. But I really like how they've set it up for all eras of Star Trek, because there's like over 11 series and a bunch of movies, and so you can they have it set up to play in even the Kelvin timeline. It just helps you kind of like, hey, do you guys want to play older, like the Star Trek Enterprise, which is like the earliest timeline wise, or like Next Generation, which is, you know, my personal favorite like era. You can kind of do that. I already have like ideas for one shots if I ever can get my friends to play it, because I'm pretty much the only Star Trek nerd. But yeah, so far solid 1 for me, even though I haven't even really looked through it all. It's just exciting, like art. And then the one I also bought at the same game shop, which I didn't realize that this was out of Kickstarter yet. I just couldn't afford the Kickstarter at the time, saw it in person, was like, oh, so I'm buying you. I really love the art direction of this book. Like, you can even see the spider webs reflecting from the sunlight outside. Look at that. It just solid for Magnus Archives. I'm still looking through it. For people who don't know, who are just going into my chaotic video, Magnus Archives is from Rusty Quill Productions. It's a horror podcast. It's about 200 episodes. They do say that you do need to watch it all to play this game if you don't want spoilers. I suggest listening to the podcast first. It's amazing. And the game seems like it's going to be really fun too to play with my friends. It's a 2d6 system. The art style all has like hints to episodes of the podcast. It is a horror. Essentially, you play part of the Magnus Institute, which kind of studies the paranormal and weird, which lines up with the podcast. That's all I'm going to say before it gets spoily. Go check it out. Rusty Quill Productions is great, and I'm excited to read more through the game that they have set. Very exciting. There's a stress meter, so since that has a stress meter and also kind of has ultra horrors or whatever, and it's a horror, the best one to go next to would probably be Call of Cthulhu. I don't technically have Call of Cthulhu. I have the starter kit. I don't understand Call of Cthulhu. It's an Eldritch horror, which I can get behind. I'm very interested in that stuff. That's pretty cool. But like, I'm opening this, but this is a box because it's the starter kit. There's 3 books and a bunch of different papers. I am already overwhelmed. It's a DM100 system, which I am making my own game that's set in that. It's just like how it just kind of overwhelms me. I had to even get a manager at a game shop to tell me which one's the player's handbook and which one is like the DM's guide, and they had neither in stock, so I went ahead with the starter kit. Because I also wanted to look into starter kits if that's something I thought was necessary, especially with reading through Call of Cthulhu's starter kit and already being overwhelmed. I do appreciate that they do provide a dice set. I have that set with my collection, so that's why it's not in here. I mean, if you like super complicated games and you're already into TTRPGs, this probably is a good one. I don't know, I think I just need to look through it more and really give it a chance. I'll probably buy the, player's handbook equivalent and kind of do a proper read through, because maybe I'm just not understanding the starter kit. That might be it. So I think Magnus Archives and Call of Cthulhu may complement each other well. If you like one, you probably like the other. Just for my 3 free-throughs. But, and other games. Tales from the Loop. I think this game's art direction is gorgeous. If you're a big fan of like E.T. or 80s movies, you are going to dig this one. It is based in the Swedish Malarian Islands. It is a Swedish game. I have an English copy because unfortunately I don't know any. Is it Swedish or Portuguese? I think it's Swedish. It's a beautiful game, but let me just show you like a page. Like if you like E.T. or those like group of kids going through like an adventure or trying to solve something, you'll like this game. It does say it has inspiration from those old 80s films like that. Like their classes are literally like a kid stereotype or like cliques, like popular kid or rocker or weirdo, troublemaker, stuff like that. And I think it's just a fun thing. You play as a group of like kids to teenagers. It's just so silly. Like here's the page, but the thing is, just looking at the art already, you can kind of tell that it has some more futuristic sci-fi elements. And that goes into the lore of the game, which I really love. Like, here's a good one of, like, you have, like, a dinosaur and stuff. This game makes it where you can really do your own magical or, like, sci-fi-esque stuff with it, because it's essentially, like, testing facilities after the Cold War still weren't active, so weird shit happened, and this is just, like, the result of it. I mean, but the game is kind of set to be your Stranger Things, your E.T., you know, like that. They say that a lot of those type of things were the inspiration. And they even tell you how to even change towns, because they have 2 towns set up, and like how to make it into maybe your local town or anything like that. But it says like 10 movies that inspired them. It was like Karate Kid, Gremlins, Back to the Future, Top Gun, Ghostbusters, The Goonies. Like those are all good things to think about. I mean, to just end off Tales from the Loop to tell you about it. It is role-playing in the 80s that never was. That is like their slogan for their game, and I think it suits it very well. And I think anyone should definitely give this one a check out. This one's one of my favorites in my collection. Going into another favorite, which I think is one of the most accessible books if you have never played a tabletop before. That game being Ryotama. If you like old Japanese RPG games like First Final Fantasy, or even more modern ones like Tales from the Sky, you'll love the aesthetic of this one. You can just tell by the art alone that that's what it is. But this one's very good to hop in if you want to play different characters. Like, alright, I'm in and I'm out. I want to play a different character and no one dies. Like, they have a very satisfying way of setting that with the world building of this game. To explain how easy this game is to share, we haven't played a TTRPG. This game goes into, like, why these games are fun. It is a Japanese game, so they have a little bit different wording, but even if you go into a different game, you would know what they're talking about. But it's like, why are they fun? Like, what is the game? What is role-playing? You know, they go into all of that. But even before they even go into that, we go to, like, one of the first pages in the book, like, early on. My bad, not before. But, like, you start off the book, and you're reading, and you're like, okay, this is fun, little introductions of things, like, hey, first page, they quickly just go over to set the scene. You're playing travelers. You can play a minstrel, a merchant, a farmer, a healer, a hunter, an artisan, or a noble. Like, it goes into that just straight off the bat, and it really, I think, sets the tone. It even gives the GM a role class to play, like, their own. Like, the game masters are doing stuff. And just kind of like how to go read the book, the table of contents, to like a little introduction of how, like, the world, and then about tabletops and about the traveling, like you are a traveler, what that means, and all that stuff, and give you a general rundown before we even go in. And then it's like, okay, before we get into mechanics, let's go into vocabulary. And I think that's why I like this game so much, is it goes into like dice, what a scenario is, what a game master is, what are you as a player, you know, like what do we mean by party or sheet or dice or a fumble or scenario. Like, they go into vocabulary, and I think that's amazing, because we'll get into D&D, but I think that's where that one falls, because This game is such a simple one to read and very easy to understand, and you're just excited as, like, someone who's never played a TTRPG. I would have loved this to be my first one, because just damn, it is beautiful. Down to just, I enjoy the art style. But if you have someone who's really overwhelmed in getting into tabletop games and they like a lighthearted game that's more your lighthearted JRPG action travel ones, highly recommend. I adore this one. Since I mentioned that I would love that one as my first game, we're gonna show you my first ever TTRPG. Cyberpunk Red. Okay, let me explain how this went. I was invited to play Cyberpunk Red. I've never played a TTRPG before. Besides, a minuscule try of D&D in high school, which we don't talk about, because nothing actually happened from that. Cyberpunk Red is a D10 system. It's very overwhelming. It is a chunky TTRPG. The smaller ones are about 200 pages. D&D, of course, it's big, but the player's handbook is roughly 300. Cyberpunk Red is about 450. It's a chunker, but you only need one book to play this one. History of Cyberpunk Red. Before I actually get into more about it, because I love the history of Cyberpunk Red that people might not know, is there was originally a other TTRPG of Cyberpunk. And then they made the Cyberpunk 2077 game that is incredibly popular. Pretty much no loading screens. It is a pretty cool game. And then they went ahead and redid the TTRPG. Cyberpunk Red is a prequel of 2077, the video game. If you love Cyberpunk, you will like this one. It is a bit complicated. I mean, they break down your character sheet, by the way, is 3 pages, and they are packed to the brim. I literally forced essentially a pink tiefling into this game and made it work wonderfully. I adored the party I was in. I played a long campaign of it. It's a good one, I would say. It fits the aesthetic of 2077 to not even a fault. I would say it is hard to find information if you're looking back into the book. Let's say, hey, I forgot that ability, how it really functions. Let me go find it. That I find difficult, at least for me. But making a character went really fast. Our session 0 was literally just our DM reading through the history. Just giving us our history, like how the war was, how did we get here, because it's essentially an alternate reality of our modern day. Is cyberpunk, for people who don't know. So we went through that, and what I really like about it is they give us, like, big lore descriptions for each, like, not lore, but, like, gives you a lot to get the vibe of each class. When you get to the building class after that, it kind of goes into, here's how we're going to be building your character in a very tech way. But it goes into, like, even your cultural origins. You can roll a d10 if you just want to do random if you don't know. But it goes into, like, your personality, your history, who your enemies are, your friends are, when building a character. And it shows that right away. And I think it really helps you get what type of character you want to make and solidify role-playing really easily. Well, if you just throw yourself into, like, some games, you're like, I don't know how to role-play my character. Like with D&D, I have a character that we're playing in a Dark Souls-like campaign, and I love him. But it's very hard to figure out his personality, where I want to go through, like, a questionnaire. Like, I want to go through Cyberpunk Red's character creation of just, like, your character, who they are, not your stats, to help me really develop how to roleplay him. Because there's things, like, with my character Yushe that I used for Cyberpunk Red. With this, I felt like I was really comfortable with, like, how would she react if her backstory or trauma comes up? Or how would she react to this scenario? Or if someone comes up to her that is a friend, how would she react to that? To help me make roleplayer and player as a character so much more fun and more dynamic, well, I'm still working. It's a new campaign, our Dark Souls-like campaign, but I still love it. This was my first one. I don't recommend it as your first one. It's a little overwhelming. But if you love Cyberpunk, you'll love this game. And it is a fun and wild ride. We're gonna go through my minis. These are the smallest ones in my collection. They're all pretty much kind of indie, and there's things I love about them and things I hate. First off, we're going to go through Root. Root is based off the board game Root. This game was hard. Reading through the core book, it's a very simple game. It's a small book of 250 pages, including the index. It is small. It's pretty simple, but I found it really hard to even find what dice to use. It's a 2d6 system, I'm pretty sure. But when I was reading, I was just really confused. Also, an issue I have with these smaller books, which I think one of the other ones is going to be a better example of, just walls of text. This is very overwhelming. It's very hard for me to reference if I'm looking for that specific paragraph, while Ryutama doesn't have that problem. That one's a very easy one, a quick reference guide. This one's not. I was reading through this book kind of back to front, and it took me a while to figure out like what dice I was using, what the stats were. It doesn't have but if you like a fun, light-hearted thing like Woodland Adventure, playing little woodland animals, and a place where like societies are building in different factions, it has a world. If you like the board game, but you also like D&D, you might enjoy this one. I just think take your time to really understand the game, because I was really confused. There's no initiative. It's kind of just what makes sense at the time, which I find really overwhelming as someone who prefers steps, solid mechanics. So it's just whatever. After that, we're going to go to a completely different aesthetic. Blades in the Dark. Blades in the Dark is... How do I explain Blades in the Dark? I would say it kind of, if you like the darker, grittier things like Magnus Archives or Call of Cthulhu or Cyberpunk, Blades in the Dark kind of fits under those. You have your more lighthearted ones and your more darker ones. Blades of the Dark is dark. Title says it right there. My thing with Blades in the Dark is it also has a lot of walls of text, but they do break it up into 2 columns, more common than TTRPG does, and I find that a little easier to read. The art is hard to reference if you're one of those people like me who likes to use the art as a quick reference to skim through and be like, aha. They don't really have that in the art that they do. I don't know if it's just a printing error of my copy. When I see art, I don't know what it is a lot of the times. There is things, don't get me wrong, that aren't like that. Like in the back where we see contrast of example adventures or starting adventures for the game. But there's a lot of this. This is really dark. I mean, I can tell, but it's hard for me. I know that the game's supposed to be dark and in the night, but it's just that lack of contrast, I think, makes it where my brain kind of hurts. I think the concept of the game is very cool. It is essentially you're in this town and there's monsters all outside of it. I think it kind of fits more of the Dark Souls aesthetic, at least when it comes to the grittiness of the vibe. But make Dark Souls industrial. It's more based off of the 19th century, but make it magic-y and fantasy with ghosts. The overall thing about this book, the plot of this one is a lot of heists. If you're heists and Dark Souls grittiness, you might like Blades in the Dark. Don't get me wrong, this one was a hard one for me just conceptually to read, as my neurodivergency, I think, got in the way of how the book is laid out. So if I got that, vibe wrong, just let me know in the comments. But it's okay. I don't really care for it. I don't think it's my type of game. It might be yours. But yeah, that's that. The last one of my small ones, I don't know how this one came into my possession. It showed up to my door with a name I don't use anymore. Don't know how this came to my address. No one I knew. Friends, family, colleagues. I don't know. It was just there. It's Kids on Bikes 2nd edition. And this one, I would say, is even smaller than Root. It's 180 pages. First page is about Session 0. Good. If I didn't know what a TTRPG is, and I just picked this up to try to play something with my friends, get into it, I wouldn't know. So this one, if you know TTRPGs, you'll understand this book a lot more. If you're a beginner, wouldn't suggest. It kind of sets up if you're playing a campaign, setting up a campaign, instead of what I would want to know first. Alright, what's the world? What's that? It doesn't do that. It goes into Session 0 checklist. Setting expectations, discussing horror, content warnings in a pre-game form, what a detour list is, which is just their wording of, okay, let's stop and see if are we all having fun. Then it goes into possible content warnings and historical accuracy and treatment of marginalized groups and characters' ages, and then road signals, which is essentially their consent rest stops, which is essentially what I consider called a peace table, where there's a mediator and trying if there's an argument, a romance and intimacy of the characters, and all of that. So that's about the first 18 pages is literally about a session 0. And to me, I understand wanting to go into those things about marginalized groups and, ages, because it is about children. I think that's important. Do I think 20 pages before I even know what the game is about? Maybe not. I would honestly think I was really overwhelmed with that and would put it probably further in the back, or even just let's get the vibe of the book before we even hit a session 0, because I got very overwhelmed with that and I read through it all. And then chapter 20, world building and all this. I think it's a pretty interesting game. I think it fits all under Tales from the Loop, but not its uniqueness of being a lot more funky in the way of dinosaurs and weird stuff happening, because experimental plants, like power plants from the Cold War going on, it has that twist. This is going more into your kids on bikes, Stranger Things, or E.T. This goes more in heart with that, which is such a fun concept. I do love that. But I think maybe this one, just how it's set up, is not enjoyable to me. There's not a lot of art in the book, so there is art, don't get me wrong, but if I do a quick, one of these, there's not as much art as other books, which helps me visually understand what I'm looking at on a page. I really like how Ryutama on a vocabulary shows a set of dice. This is the set of dice. This is what these are. This is what it's for. Even D&D, having someone casting a spell on a spells list page, that helps me solidify in my memory how I'm playing and things like that, personally. And that's what I would like to do with my own game. But it's, again, back to that, here's a huge wall of text, and that's very overwhelming for me. It's not broken up into simpler sections. It's going to be people who don't mind this. I'm just one of these people where how my brain works and neurospiciness, I guess, finds it really hard to read this book, and I get very overwhelmed and harder to remember the mechanics. I have quite a few. I enjoy it. I played 2 campaigns of it. I love D&D. But as someone with my brain, it was very overwhelming to figure out how to play. When I'm making a character, I am super overwhelmed. I get really struggled with spells. Spells are specifically in alphabetical order and not by who can cast them or by level. And I found that really overwhelming. Besides having that with that's D&D 5th edition. I have not bought 5.5. I heard great things about the accessibility and reading of 5.5, and when I get that, I will definitely make a video regarding my opinions on it, the accessibility of it, looks, and all that, because I think, from what I've heard, it's a lot better at the things that I think are flawed about D&D 5e, but it's a classic for a reason. I love it. The game is fun. It's so versatile. You can play however you want. The D20 system is iconic because of this game and is honestly enjoyable. I have some of my most fondest memories with friends playing Dungeons & Dragons. But with that, since I do want to make my own TTRPG game, I wanted to see how they've progressed, so I'm slowly collecting all the edition. I do have 2nd edition, which I have not opened yet, so I will not give any opinions about, or really any at all, because it is pat-wrapped and I'm scared to touch it. It's been very damaged. This is Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. I do want to read and review this as well when I get all of the editions. So I also then have the 4th edition of D&D, Player's Handbook. I do have some hot takes about this. I really love the layout of this book. Besides the art being, older, I love how we already immediately, on the days, what's in a D&D game? What is in Dungeons & Dragons? We're going right off the bat. How do you play? We got the adventure. We got game dice. We have a photo of dice. We go into core mechanics. This is all stuff that I enjoy. They have examples. There is some of this in D&D, but with this one, I also love how it's laid out. Besides things being highlighted, because this is a used copy, It still has some similar layouts as the D&D 5e in Order, which I don't think I have much to say about. But I do love, with this one, how they have the colored tables. Like, this looks a lot, to me, this is a lot easier to digest than, let's say, we go into the Player's Handbook of D&D 5e. Oh boy, I love this, but let me find spells. It's like this. Spells are like this. And this just overwhelmed me. I started playing as a DM first. So, when I first made a character, I was like, geez, this is difficult. Because I'm also a DM, and I do crazy shit. Like, I am going to make a Rogue Fallen Aasimar, Hallowed One, Paladin Warlock multi-class. Yes, I made that difficult on myself. But I did that, and when I first started looking for his spells, I got really overwhelmed, because I'd find one that I thought was cool, and then I'd look and Warlocks can't have it. Or I'm looking at the list of ones that, like, Warlocks can have on that site, and skipping, like, the 50 pages to spells, and I see a cool one, I'm like, no, I can't do that, and then this, and that, and that, and this, and but I found the Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition, as much as from what I've heard, since I haven't had a chance to play, the mechanics are awful, and it's just kind of garbage, and this is just trying to then simplify a lot of things. The layout is more, it doesn't overwhelm me as a beginner. I think that's my big takeaway. If we go over my huge collection, because I have D&D's, the classics that you need, Player's Handbook, Dungeons Master Guide, Monster Manual, the campaign I'm running as a DM is literally an Explorer's Guide to Wildmount with my own campaign setting, as you can tell by my million tabs. It's been a long one. I'm still going with it. And I have the expansions. Like, even though I have all this for D&D, that's me summing that up. This is cool. I enjoy D&D, but I am overwhelmed. Accessibility. And that, I think, kind of stems to the end of my overall critiques of my huge collection that you cannot see anymore. Whoops. Like, my huge collection of games is accessibility right away. I have read these games, and I've taken notes about them, and I find it very difficult as a new player with pretty much almost all of these to start. If, you've been wanting to play D&D and you haven't found a party, and so you finally find a group of friends you've never played, and you try, it can be really overwhelming and hard to access, especially maybe it's just me because I'm neurodivergent, but reading or re-referencing books that are giving more complicated games to simplified, I find them hard. And I am making a TTRPG. I'm making my own tabletop role-playing game. That's what this channel's kind of about. And my journey with that, and I found my biggest problem, even though if I love a game, the mechanics are cool, the concept is super fun and interesting, I get overwhelmed and break down, and I will give up on a game because I couldn't figure out what dice to use or how much I would enjoy the game. So with my own game, that's something I'm trying to focus on, is accessibility, and for you to be able to jump into the book and have fun with it. Of course, with games and their complicatedness, as everyone knows who's played a tabletop role-playing game, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. It's shiny math rocks that you throw and hope that they land on a good number. And with that and all the complicated mechanics of games and stats, that's the inevitable, but trying to make it easy for people who've never played is one of my goals. And I love all the games in my collection. I'm so proud of them, and I'm happy I have them. I want more. There's a gap here. A couple more. I'm excited to read because I love how diverse these games are. Like, I have ones that are super lighthearted to the darkest depths of scary, and I adore them all. As you can tell, I'm a big, vast interest even from this shelf that is in D&D. I'm the Grim Reaper to Promise Neverland. This is just a general art book that I love. Dungeon Meshi, This is just me wanting to go over my TTRPGs and rant about them a bit. No, I've been a bit harsh on some, but I do adore them all. And I'd love to know your guys' favorite TTRPGs and the games in the comments. I am making my own. That's a D100 system and set in the fantasy world's 19th century. I'll be making videos about those. and I hope you guys will follow along my journey of making that and reviewing other things. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you guys around. Bye!